about watching from the shooting gallery over there on the side when Dan opened up his topic of the UBD tree and big ideas and essential questions, how I noticed the cognitive load in the room just went to red line. I thought that was really interesting how easy it is. Some of this stuff is pretty easy, understandable, but when you actually start to have to really do some deep thinking, we're all put in this pretty challenging place, and that's hard to remember sometimes if we haven't been a student for a while, what that's like for college students to face that on a daily basis with that load, because they're about to talk about different kinds of understanding, and one of the things I was noticing is when you're approaching your subject, framing those essential questions and ultimately the big idea, you're imparting on it your current understanding. You're asking them to come to where your viewpoint, your perspective on the material is now, and that's probably changed from when you first approached the material, and probably will continue to change throughout your life. So it's kind of a neat thing that this is an ever-changing ecosystem that your classroom is, and as you're designing your experience, it's an intentional process, right? That's the thing about course design, is it's intentional, or purposeful is another word for it. So you're setting this goal, this object out there based on what you see, what you understand for the moment, and you're taking students there. So I just want to start with a little bit of Whitman. I'm going to put that up there and let you guys digest that for a moment. It's relevant, I think, to what Dan was talking about and also to what I'm about to talk about. I'm not going to define for you what my impressions of that are relevant to what our topic is. I'll let you take from that what you will. But I'm going to shift gears from a serious text bomb now to a visual bomb. This is one of my favorite paintings. I happened upon it in the process of learning about understanding by design. So I think it illustrates well some of what we're talking about. Anybody know what painting this is? Not Da Vinci. Close though, same time period. And it's in Rome. I'll give you a hint. This is Raphael. Raphael, yeah. So this is the School of Athens, painted by Raphael in about 1509. And Raphael, he was commissioned to do this work to visualize to put all in one place all of the great minds, all the great thinkers known to date, and that's about the early 16th century. So it's sort of a who's who of everyone he thought important in time. And you can see it's a great list of all of the figures important, what were considered important in Western philosophy at the time. So there's Pythagoras, and of course right in the middle, we have Plato and Aristotle. He kind of jokingly put himself in there. There's some debate about that, but there's Empedocles and Anaximander, Ptolemy, you name it. They're part of their Alcibiades. All these great figures are present in this beautiful, beautiful painting, which is in the Vatican. It occupies one of 4 walls in what was then the library of the Vatican. So after sharing that with you, I had a brief quiz for you. So that kind of gets to the point that sometimes quizzes in general and superficial understandings or just remembering can really fall short of any sort of significant understanding of any bit of information. So what can we understand about such a thing as a painting by Raphael painted in the early 16th century? So I'm going to ask you folks, what are some things we can understand about that? I'll go back and look at it when we talk about that. What are some things we can understand about that? Well, we could start off easily. We could just remember everybody in painting. Okay, we've already established that would be one way to approach that. Is maybe in the early 20th century, if you were in high school, that would be your assignment, right? I'm going to give you a quiz. It's going to have numbers pointing to various people, and I want you to tell me who they are. That would be a very superficial level of understanding. What else might we know about that? Yes?
Well, if it's in the Vatican,
Yes.
then the Pope would have commissioned it.
Okay.
Or said it was cool, so then you can't necessarily say that, you know, religious thought and the deep thinkers who may have been secular are necessarily separate.
Okay, so we might ask, why were they chosen? Who are these guys and why were they chosen? That's a very different question than the first question. Yes?
In the time of Renaissance, so they would go for the antiquity and they would.
There you go. What were their influences on 16th century thought? That would be a really profound, like if you could go through there and identify each of those different people and say, this is that person's influences on Renaissance thinking. Wow, that would be a PhD thesis probably right there. I mean, there'd be a lot of deep, rich content there. Okay? You could go beyond that, potentially, and do a little bit more toward, here are these great people, these are all the great thinkers of the time. Well, they're all these old white guys. And then the seat of Western power, which at the time was the Vatican, what does that mean for us today? What does it mean then? That's like a whole nother dimension of understanding that you could derive from that one work. You could ask yourself, where was Raphael himself at? Why did he pick those people? Not why were they chosen in general, but his personal relationship to each of those. And in the interest of time, I'm going to save us all. The last one is, who would you choose? And why would you choose? If you were going to do your own mural, who would you choose for the most important idea maker in your life, or that led to you to be where you are? So that's one very brief set of very different understandings we can derive from one simple historical object. It's pretty deep, right? I mean, you can imagine if you start going in there, again, the cognitive load just goes to the red line, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, what does this mean for my subject? How, you know, I can approach it in so many different ways. And that's a good thing. That's kind of where we want to go with this segment, where we want to talk about how to approach, how to get from students some of these deeper, richer, more complicated understandings, and at least be purposeful when you design activities, so that you're not just testing for the superficial understandings. You're going beyond that and pushing them to deeper, more lasting understanding. So as educators, as Westerners, we like to categorize things, and it's not any different. We categorize life forms, of course. Most of you recognize that these all fall within a very complex system of life form classification invented by Linnaeus. Wonderful, yeah. So Linnaeus, exactly, yeah. So Linnaeus, yeah, he came up with this great system of classification from all the stuff we know. And ever since then, I mean, even the Greeks were pretty big into classification systems. But interestingly, there's this segment right here in the middle, paradoxa, which was stuff he didn't know where that went. And it included things like satyrs and the Draco and it's got the phoenix in there and the hydra. He knew these things were out there, he just didn't quite know how they might relate to other things. And I think that's a pretty good model for understanding, because we're still, in my opinion, in a pretty rudimentary phase for really understanding understanding. So we have taxonomies of understanding, but there may be a little bit of slop. That's the way only I can relate to it, as sort of with a science background. These are not objective realities. These are a best case approximation of some different artificial categorizations that we use to identify different types of understandings. And these two authors, Wiggins and McTeague, the authors of Understanding by Design, came up with 6 categories they call the 6 facets of understanding. And they're helpful. They can help you think about what you're asking of your students. So if we're not using papers, we're not using quizzes, we're not using tests, because it's possible from the paper to shoot for some of these other areas, but there's other activities we can do, and they give you some examples here. For instance, perspective. If I wanted students to get a perspective, I could ask them to investigate a technological artifact from the perspective of different regions and countries. So what does that mean to different cultural contexts? Obviously, explanation is pretty straightforward. Students might develop an illustrative brochure to explain the principles and practices of a particular type of technology. The the point is that there's a lot, again, just like with the Raphael's painting, there's a lot of different understandings we can use for just about any topic. And in a moment, we're going to do some activities with different topics, and you're going to develop some different potential understandings. And then hopefully, you'll be able to approach your topic and generate some different types of understanding. So this is another visualization of the 6 facets. And the point of this is that this is not science. This is more art. There are these kind of rough general branches of empathy. We might get sensitivity, personal sensitivity. We might find value in different aspects. It's just a visualization. Some of these are going to resonate with you more strongly than others, and that's fine. There's a lot out there. And I'm going to show you several just to see maybe, yeah, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. We're mostly going to refer to William and McTeague 6 facets. So we're going to go back through our list of understandings really quickly. So who are these guys? Might be called explain. Just a very simple, fundamental. Why were they chosen? The category maybe fit into William and McTeague's interpret, right? You have to interpret why they were chosen. What were their influences on 16th century thought? You're applying your knowledge. You know something about what they contributed, and you're responding to that via application. This is a perspective question. What are the implications? You might get the perspective of, say, you were living in Africa at the time, or South America, just when conquistadors showed up. You wouldn't really think those folks had the greatest ideas on the planet, or that they were sharing them with you in a meaningful way. Empathy. This is one of my favorite ones. It's really rich. It develops a lot of lasting impressions. Where was he at? Where was Raphael at? And lastly, who would I choose and why? Self-knowledge. Learning about yourself in context, all that great stuff. Okay. So many of you have probably heard of Bloom's taxonomy. That's another system of organizing understandings. It has an implied hierarchy to it that it may work for you, it may not. Some people would say that this foundation level is a lower order thinking than some of the higher orders. Generally, we don't like to think that way. It's like, why impose this superlative relationship on them? Just let them be. They're all important, they're all valuable. If you're studying physics, you need to remember a heck of a lot of physics before you can move up there. So this is not any inherent less valuable. Depending upon your field, I know anatomy, it's the same. You really can't talk about anatomy unless you remember all of your anatomy, all the terminology. It's very important. Bloom's has been updated a couple times, different models. There's the old version and the new version. Then it was revised by Webb. Again, the important thing is, if this was a science, we would probably not see this level of sort of, how about this way, how about that way, how about this way? Or maybe it is a science and that's part of the process. It doesn't matter. The point is you have to find what works for you for approaching your material. Another great author, this is one of my favorites, came up with this taxonomy of significant learning experiences. And he puts all foundational knowledge here, just 1/6 of the pie. And the rest of learning experiences fits out here. This is significant learning over here. And learning how to learn, learning about oneself, developing new feelings, interests, values, those are important outcomes for an educational experience that he identifies explicitly, which is kind of mind-blowing. If you think about someone is thinking that purposefully about creating a learning experience that incorporates the human experience, right? Much more so than just the information. It's not just, here's everything I know, read it, quiz on Monday. It's very different. It's looking, it's expecting some sort of personal transformation. So, what does it all mean? How do we as instructors evaluate the achievement of understanding if there's so many different facets? I'll throw that one out. How might we do that? If there's so many different types of understanding, how do we evaluate? Because that's what we do, right? We assess understanding. Do they understand? How might we evaluate that?
By keeping things a bit loose so that students have an opportunity to demonstrate like the different layers of understanding that they have. rather than having, say, multiple choice questions.
Right. That's a great, rather than saying I have multiple choice questions, it's pretty difficult to demonstrate that you're empathizing with a historical figure on a multiple choice exam, or that you have some deeper understanding. So you give them multiple outlets, presentations, journal that they can write in the voice of a historical figure, or just a broad diversity of outlets for understanding that are purposefully aligned with your hoped-for learning outcome. So how do students demonstrate their complexity of understanding? Are quizzes, papers, and tests completely sufficient? Probably not. They can serve a really powerful purpose, and we're not totally dissing those. Certainly, we've all, as instructional designers, helped faculty create a lot of quizzes, help them embed tests, do all that stuff. That's fine too. But it's kind of neat when you can think of something a little more purposefully designed exactly for your hoped-for learning outcome. So how can we generate assignments that are exciting and new and ask students to go the extra mile? That's one of our favorite tasks as designers, is working with you to think of activities that students might do that are fun and are powerful and really reveal the understanding that you're hoping that they'll achieve. Okay, so we're not just talking about like these jump off the cliff things, right? At the end of the semester, I need you to hand in this paper and you either got it or you didn't. We're not just talking about summative or culminating performance tasks, right? That would be the final exam, that would be the final paper. Either you got it or you didn't, we're done, see you later. I got a new cohort coming in after spring break or after semester break. Rather, evidence of understanding includes observations, dialogues, smaller performances, projects, self-assessments, peer assessments. There's a lot of ways for students to demonstrate that they know. If you're assessing one of your peers on the topic, you have to understand in order to successfully assess their work. So, and of course, this is just a simple, this is Bloom's or the Bloom's Revised with a bunch of different tech pieces there superimposed over different layers. To let you know, a lot of these web tools really do give students a lot of opportunity to express their understanding, if you can think of a creative way to do that. Okay, so it's almost activity time. This is my last slide before it's activity time. But I wanted to walk you through this little exercise. So for instance, on the topic of comparative anatomy, and you're about to do this yourselves for about 25 minutes. On the topic of comparative anatomy, if I was to say, roll a 6-sided dice, if I had a big one, I could choose 6 facets, and we could roll it over here, and the answer is going to be a 5. And I could ask you to come up with an assessment where students demonstrate their empathy around the topic of comparative anatomy. Empathy in the service of understanding. That's not easy to do. Some of these are going to be awkward fits, some of them are not. And in the process, you can always upgrade. Go for a harder one. But let's stick with empathy for a moment. On the subject of comparative anatomy, you might empathize with either one of the early scholars in the field. You could begin to understand some people who had insights into the relationship between analogous and homologous structures in living organisms. You might have to bring your own insights to that. You might look at yourself for those, that probably more self-knowledge, but I'll throw it out there anyway, for those analogous structures. You know, why is your jaw the way it is compared to a fish's jaw? There's reasons for that. They're analogous structures. Okay, so just thinking about that. So the activity you'd be asking students to do is draw a diagram that shows the relationship between their personal structures and structures on some other set of organisms, up to them. So you have to think of your challenge with a partner that's going to change every minute, every two minutes. It's going to be kind of a scramble to get you out of your chairs in the late afternoon. You're going to scramble, and you're going to come up with an activity that would correspond to one of those facets. And I might, some of the slides, I'm going to throw out a bunch of different activities in either Bloom's or Green Teague's 6 facets. So I'm going to give you a sample, one more sample, because I know it's a little bit this afternoon. Someone's didn't drink coffee. So for instance, a scientific method, if I was to roll my die again, I'll just toss it here. It's a 1. Oh, very simple. what is an innovative and exciting activity that you could ask the students to do that would explain the scientific method? Well, how about conduct a video interview with Charles Darwin or someone else in the character of? So have them model Stephen Hawking, or that might be a little awkward actually, but have them model whomever and interview someone, and that would be a kind of a fun way for some undergraduates to display their ability to explain the scientific method, right? As opposed to just simply saying, here's a quiz question, there's A, B, and C, there's 3 definitions of scientific method, you pick the right one, and jumble the words. It's not as rich as having them do it in their own words or maybe in another persona. Okay, so the object is fun, engaging. Online courses.
I would like a student to write a limerick about the scientific.
See? Beautiful. Yeah.
I was
Fun.
thinking about Legos personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can imagine having a student apply scientific method. You could do a lot of fun stuff with that. So online courses in general, all good courses live or die around the quality and the engagement value of their activities. And we do them a favor, we do ourselves a favor if we can come up with rich experiences. Okay. So, I think I have 14 slides. Every 2 minutes will get us just about done on time. So, every 2 minutes I'll say swap, and I'm going to put my little timer on here. Got my little auto timer. It's going to work.
You need a timer?
Yeah, do you want to do a timer? That's fantastic, thank you. So the big thing is, the first one you can do with someone at your table, maybe the next one, but then you're going to have to start swapping around, because you can't do the same person twice. On your mark. Get set. Okay. It's uniformitarianism. Oh, did I mention you might not know what some of these are? Yes. Get your iPads handy. Uniformitarianism, and it's interpret.
So that's part of the slideshow.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay.
You can jot them down, you can post to Google Plus.
Theory, and then everything is.
There you go. I'll be the one holding the dice here, so just.
Oh, so it's just saying the same.
I'm still struggling with that right idea that maybe like just one specific thing or I don't know something.
Well,
1 minute. 1 minute. Change. I mean I don't know. So many things.
You can post it to Google Plus, that's great. So otherwise, we're supposed to come up with it. Just make a note.
Yeah.
I have it turned on.
Activity where students interpret. Well, so interpretation.
30 seconds.
So I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So. I'm over here trying to stay away.
You know,
No, that's great. I think you got it. I think so.
what did you guys come up with? Are we supposed to post on the blog?
Two people.
Google Plus.
Google Plus.
If you can't do Google Plus in time, just write it down, but I think your time's almost up. Time, switch.
Oh.
New topic is kin selection, and number 3, you're going to create an activity where students apply their knowledge of kin selection.
To apply it, we could have an activity where
The reproductive success of your
talk about Title IX.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm thinking, like survey your classmates.
Somehow, something to do with their own experience.
Speed dating? Yeah.
And their own,
No, we wouldn't want them to do it.
Well, how could you
the only thing I'm thinking about is family. 1 minute.
You're coming up with the students where, an activity where students apply their knowledge of.
Oh,
Why we favor it.
30 seconds. Okay. Oh, are we supposed to post it?
Yeah. Like what they got.
Time. Find a new partner. Odd number.
The new topic is Reaganomics, and you get to evaluate. That's number 5. Evaluate. Yeah. Have your students evaluate Reaganomics through some exciting new way. Innovative.
Find a partner.
Number 5 or 4?
Deregulate, evaluate, wait, what are bounded for? Reaganomics.
I guess you get an idea of where I am.
Oh, fantastic.
1 minute. Okay, time.
Mayflower Compact. You're coming up with an assessment, and students will show the
So an exercise for good.
Or when there's a situation. So I'm not sure what the activity is. I think you can't really maybe you could actually
I wonder if you could create every single person in a group, like give each of them a role, and like most of them are white students, and then one person minority is
we could have
or
or you could there. You could also have the people who are on the other side of the ocean.
1 minute.
So you have so you grab this themselves or something here.
Yeah, and then
Journal entry.
For 30 seconds. Because no governing control.
So to have them where they came from.
I do. But it's something that people often don't go there.
Yeah, I really need to read up on my history.
A little bit.
I just assume it's Chinese.
Time.
Oh, really? Isn't it called the
Switch again.
Go look it up.
Number 2, understanding.
Somebody probably knows that. If not, it's in your-
Do you need a partner? Yes, please.
Uh-oh,
Who needs a partner?
How about they look at us?
They defeated the main fleet of the Ottoman Empire in 5 hours of fighting on the north edge of the Gulf of Corinth off western Greece.
The Battle of Lepanto.
Parallels like using modern.
1 minute.
I don't know.
Somehow that didn't go.
Let them duke it out.
Side one. Right up the plane. I'd have to take the plane. Yeah, I guess I'm
So taking it and from the modern application. Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Do you have a partner?
What?
Do you have a partner?
No, I don't.
Oh, is that green dot?
The whole.
So it's the whole.
Join another group because we know.
I'm gonna join you down. They have an odd number.
All right.
Where we at?
The whole self-knowledge.
He controlled their anger, and so it would maybe 1 minute. Identify when you're going in that direction and have to from letting your anger transform you. Although I'm not sure if it's a bad guy. I just know he gets angry in his grip.
But I think he gets angry at because like he's justifiable. Yeah, it's justifiable anger. Yeah, and however, it's almost like he transforms himself into this kind of a superhero in order to actually have the good to keep back.
Yeah, promotes vigilante justice in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, yeah. I mean, it's no different than the Lone Ranger putting on his little mask and going out, you know, it's different. Superman too. I mean, he goes into a phone, you know, they transform themselves, you know, into something bigger than the situation. Oh no. I don't have a partner. You want to go? Yeah. Katie really knows this with perspective. I can really, that's the key.
Not like that.
There should be a way to just do a slideshow.
Kids, especially because
1 minute.
yeah, right.
Maybe that you could have them write something about times when yeah, right. Experiment. Try staying up for 4 days and see what happens.
Maybe because here we have different days, right? And what goes, maybe what goes
Find videos, yeah. Talk about the reef sailors. Tell me
the narrator talks about love that died when he was young. And she's buried.
One minute.
Okay. So write an elegy.
I think you make it
And about me, lips.
30
I honestly didn't know.
Switch, last one.
I don't know. Okay. Yeah. And then time.
Oh, there you go. And get a timer.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're calculating something.
Right, so how can we apply this? What number is that?
Number.
I like that.
Up there it's number 6.
I did try to, but yeah, because another gentleman that teaches course, but he does questions like that. Me, out of the text, I like to go outside of the text and have them do something that gets them active in thinking about the actual ocean.
Yeah.
And like, for example,
Yes, I think so. I think that's what, and how, like, what would the best use of your time, which way would you, yeah, something either one of those.
I want them to,
Yeah.
or like what work, where do you find
Right,
topics,
right.
like where do you find people in these situations?
Do you know, have you ever seen that show, The Amazing Race?
Some of this stuff
So, like, they send
with
like,
ocean
give them a
and
task, and they have to get to this place the quickest way they can. The Amazing Race is this formula.
Anyway, so what
and they
I'm
can
trying
have
to
like
do today is to start working with the material before they actually get out there. So I don't just make up my own questions because I found that some of the ones in the book are just sort of like, you know, just by rote.
We skipped through a couple of those. I skipped some of the easy ones for you. I thought it might be useful to quickly go back if anybody had anything they wanted to share. Just go back, beginning, and you don't feel you have to, but if you had any that you're particularly inspired by, or your brain's all warmed up, and all these great creative juices flowing. Anybody come up with a good one for uniformitarianism? Someone's gonna venture one there. That's fine. What is uniformitarianism? Same as biological processes act the same today as they have in the past.
We were going to ask kids to try to identify something that is part of regular life that is similar in a range of countries.
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Neat. It kind of makes it personal to think about and also think about the students. That's cool. What about kin selection? Can you come up with any activities for your subject? Yes?
Videotaping some moose that are running as part of their process, or some other type of animal.
Cool. Cool. Kin selection is a theory that it behooves you, even if you may die in the process, it behooves you to make sure your kin survive. There's a selective process working in natural. But anything like that, like creating a video product is neat because students can post it, they can share it online. Really, it's really a rich medium. Yes.
So would that be like the experiment in high school where you have to have an egg and you're the parent and you have to make sure the egg doesn't crack for you?
Reaganomics.
Yeah, making sure that you guys.
I think this was evaluate, wasn't it? Evaluate or analyze Reaganomics.
Oh, Reaganomics.
Do you guys want to come up with anything good for students to do there? Anything that they want to share?
You tell them.
Well, we said it would be pretty easy to, the example we came up with was airline prices, like in the 80s, post or pre-deregulation, post-deregulation, and see.
How would they share that?
Well, I suppose they could make some kind of, I don't know, Excel document or graph or.
That'd be one way to do it, or something even richer perhaps that involves, you know, some kind of performance or something.
Presentation.
Like that. Presentation, exactly.
And they had a really good one for
Yes.
If you had a pyramid of sponges and you just slowly drip water at the top and see how much water and how long it
How does
takes
it
for
trickle down?
to trickle down to the
I like
bottom.
that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, how about Mayflower Compact?
It's saturated.
I think this was empathy, wasn't it? I think there was
Yeah.
at least one that I heard that I only heard one and I liked it, I can't remember.
Was it the journal
Journaling.
entry from the point of view of one of the people who pledged?
Sure. Yep, that's a great one. Is there another one?
Kate had one.
Yeah, me and Trina, we said that, what did we say? We'd give them the, what did we say?
The students would get into the role of the pilgrims and their conditions and try to maybe
Figure out how they would cope, yeah.
Cool.
negotiate.
That's so it's a form of role play in
Yeah.
the classroom. It's great, really powerful stuff there. Battle of Lepanto, I know this is all your favorite one. Nothing else you learned today, yes? Yes, you did.
What was it?
Battle of Lepanto.
Oh, yeah, the choose your own adventure story. Like a flow chart.
Have a flow chart through the battle, basically on what your decisions, you could do it at different roles within the historic event. It's really great. I love that. Yeah. Really neat, especially if you ask them to create the story. Great. Neat. Skip that one to the next one. What about the Hulk?
Yeah.
Hulk?
Self-knowledge, that's self-knowledge.
Bring it on. Who's got a good one? This is an easy one, or not easy, but it's a real potential. What do you want to say?
Talk about how we acted.
Lepanto.
What'd you do for Lepanto?
Now we realized that you don't even have to know the words.
Yes.
Like for me as a non-native speaker here, I have to have many gaps that I have to kind of overcome I can't look up every word. So that's what we did, just without knowing, we kind of found the answers. We were wondering what the students do, how they kind of can swim along without really knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I swam for 20 years that way. The Hulk, self-knowledge. How about anger management?
What color am I when I'm angry?
What color am I?
We were going to do an acting thing where you role play and have to articulate what makes you yourself.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay, circadian rhythms. People are laughing, chuckling. Perspective. This one was, right? As living in the Arctic, we all have pretty strong perspectives on circadian rhythms. Anybody have one they want to share? You're chuckling. I'm so intrigued.
The activity we came up with was see how fatigued they are after staying up all night.
Yeah, several people have come up with that in the years past. So being kind, I skipped cellular action potentials for you, and went to Annabelle Lee. What did you come up with? And this one was applying. Did I come up with anything? You have them right. Yes.
You just cut them in half and let them act a second half of the play, like it's a parody, but they would come up with another ending of the story.
Oh, parody is great. Mystery act, that's great, yeah. I think it's got Annabelle Lee's got such a strong rhythm and meter to it, you could do like either lyrics to a song or a rap or a lot of different performance or those kind of activities too. Anybody else want to share on that one? We'll move on. Okay, distance equals rate times time. Physics. I think it was creating. Anybody want to share anything on that? What might you create? What might you have students create that would demonstrate their understanding of distance equals rate times time?
Some kind of experiment.
Let's bring it on. I want to hear it.
Well, we had a couple. One that I thought maybe we could encourage them to come up with their own problem that has to be solved.
Great.
V equals R times T.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
they have to understand the formula to create the problem.
Yep, you're putting them in the role of the professional there, which is always a powerful thing. You kind of flip the tables on them, and now you're the creator, the tutor, or whatever. That's great. What else? You
They were
got?
gonna pick a name of an animal out of a jar or something, and then have to look up the speed and figure out some race type thing.
Cool. That's it, yeah. You can have them do like how long it takes them to get where they're going. You know, there's a lot of, you can really internalize that formula pretty well, and you create things based on that. Like create a table of all the places you go and how long at the different rates you might, how long it take you to do different rates. Okay. So the point of that exercise was to kind of loosen up your creative energies and capacity to think that, oh yeah, you know what, some of these are really easy to approach, some of these other aspects of understanding. Once you kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm of it, and this is just sort of a superficial take at it, but for the next 10 minutes or so, think about your own courses, the activities you have students do in your courses. Think about if you might create a new activity that would address different aspects of the 6 facets from what you've traditionally or personally, historically asked of students. So it's a great moment, hopefully, to kind of apply what you've just learned to your own course, your own concept, the things you've worked on with students. So, time for reflection.